Survival horror. The first thing that comes to mind would be Resident Evil, am I right?
Resident Evil.
And to be fair, Resident Evil did push the genre into the world renown, so it's all fair and dandy to say that RE is the defining survival horror series, even though some of the entries in the series are a bit more on the, let's say, boom boom pew pew side. With the classic RE games being very close to my own heart, I personally would also say that Resident Evil is the true OG of the survival horror series. After all, the very name of the genre, survival horror, can be found in the jewel case of Biohazard. This time we're digging a bit deeper than Resident Evil. The very origins of the genre can already be found in 1981, with 3D Monster Maze being the first one that can be considered as a survival horror game. It's a cat and mouse styled game where you are confined in a maze with a T-Rex and your goal is to escape its jaws of death. Another early example would be fittingly titled Haunted House, released a year after. Haunted House would not be a straight-up survival horror game, but it had plenty of features which are the bread and butter of the genre. Such features would be, for example, horror themes, emphasis on evasion of enemies, inventory management, and a non-linear playfield where you're to unlock new paths with specific key items. However, this time we're not digging all the way to the deepest depths of the genre. Year 1989. Enter Frédéric Reynal, a young French programmer at Infogrames. Frédéric was tasked to work with the MS-DOS port of the game called Alpha Waves, or Continuum depending on your geographical location. Converting Alpha Waves from Atari ST to MS-DOS took roughly 6 months, which eventually led to full release in 1990. Holy fuck! This must be one of, or if not the oldest PC game I've ever played. It's a decent game, but the controls are a bit too slippery in my opinion. Too bad the game's doing some weird flickering for me. This 6-month period would lock Frédéric to this rotating cube of alpha waves, which made him absolutely obsessed with 3D. In his imagination, he saw that the future of gaming would be 3-dimensional. Aside from programming, Frédéric was a huge late 70s horror movie fan, as his daily life was mostly about computers and watching movies. His father owned a VHS movie rental shop, which contributed to Frédéric's interest in movies. In 1990, he had an idea of combining the two things he was obsessed the most: horror movies and 3D gaming. The idea was roughly, you are all alone in an old haunted manor with zombies and other kind of monsters on your tail. Your objective: get out alive. Could all of this be done in 3-dimensional space with actual articulated 3D models? Just how cool would that be? With help of a fellow Infogrames artist, Didier Chanfray, the idea was visualized to a single drawing. This very drawing would be the first thing done towards realizing Frédéric's idea. For the first time, everything seemed very clear, but on the other hand, the amount of work was cosmic in size. The thing was that none of this was ever tried out before, and therefore it seemed impossible to prototype in practice. For Frédéric, the next year was filled with experimentation in 3D. This experimentation would result in a custom-made 3D editor for making models with real-time animation called 3Desk. Greatly inspired by Alpha Waves, 3Desk would be the key tool in making all the character models to the game. Another tool was also required for game scenery. Making 3D backgrounds based on polygons was out of the question because of the technical limitations back in the day. The hardware just was not there yet, so the playing field had to be done in another way. This meant, unfortunately, no real 3-dimensional backgrounds. Eventually, Frédéric would think of a concept of pre-rendered backgrounds, which meant taking pictures with a real camera in real life and then scanning them so they could be imported to a software. Imagine doing this all the way before commercial digital cameras. After the scanning, you could add points of collision to the background utilizing the software in hand. Unfortunately, the imported, scanned pictures would not work because of the software not being able to handle them as wanted, creating distortions in image dimensions. This meant that the backgrounds had to be done by hand. In September 1991, Frederick had a working prototype. This prototype was basically a combined effort of a few people, so there wasn't a dedicated team, and in addition, this was done at their leisure time after the workday at Infogrames. The prototype had backgrounds with collisions, an animated moving 3D character, and the world could be interacted with. The concept was finally pitched to Infogrames higher-ups, it was approved, and Frederick was granted a team of 4 people to begin with. As Chanfrey's inspirational picture led the development, the game still lacked a story, as there was no writer in the team. Initially, Infogrames was in talks with Chaosium in order to obtain a license to use Call of Cthulhu, the tabletop role-playing game IP, which would provide the game its story and monsters. Chaosium did not grant the license to Infogrames, as Frederick's game would distance itself too far from the tabletop RPG. This led Infogrames to assign a writer to the small team in order to create the storyline themselves. With 3 days filled with meetings, the storyline was set, and the main inspiration, alongside horror movies, would be H.P. Lovecraft's works, especially the Cthulhu mythos. To go off on a tangent, what's the difference between Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos and Chaosium's tabletop RPG? In short, the Chaosium game was based on Lovecraft's work, but it was much darker, adding themes and ideas from elsewhere, either from other works of art or completely self-made settings. It was not required to know anything about Lovecraft's work to enjoy the RPG, so it was very accessible to all the nerds in the 80s. Most likely the Cthulhu stuff most of us are aware of is based on Chaosium game universe instead of Lovecraft's work. Moving back to the main topic, in the end, Frederick's team would have roughly 10 people aboard to realize Alone in the Dark, whose final version was conceived in October 1992. The actual release date of Alone in the Dark is slightly obscured, with sources usually stating that it was released in 1992, without an accurate date of release. Most likely it was released somewhere in December 92 in Europe, as the final version was finished in October. Some sources in the internet state that it was released already in January 92, but considering the timeline of the development, according to the man himself, Frederick Reynal, that would be impossible. Regarding the US release, I'd hazard a guess that it was somewhere in January 1993. Personally, the Alone in the Dark series has evaded me almost completely. The series as a notion is familiar to me, but I've never played one personally. The original one has been on my bucket list for a while, so now is a great time to get myself a bit more culturally civilized. The playthrough will be done on the GOG version, and I have to say that GOG does exemplary work in preserving old games, and I'm gladly their customer when it comes to old PC games. I'm not sponsored in any way to say this, but I highly recommend GOG when it comes to retro PC gaming. Before we're starting up the game, please leave a like and subscribe in order to keep the channel growing. A massive thanks in advance. Greetings dear viewer, I am Hypo. Grab a snack and relax, for in this video we're taking a look at the original Alone in the Dark for the PC. So, how was it? Upon booting up the game, we are met with a spinning Infogrames armadillo. They clearly did not shy from hyping up that we're not fooling around, we have completely 3D models. By beginning the game, you are allowed to make a choice between two characters, Edward Carnby and Emily Hartwood. Edward Carnby is a private detective contracted by an antique dealer to visit the Derceto manor. The dealer is interested in a special piano located in the Derceto loft. The piano is told to attract plenty of customers as it is fit with multiple secret drawers. Carnby's preliminary research regarding Derceto unveils that its former owner, a painter named Jeremy Hartwood, had taken his own life at the very loft the piano is supposedly located. There are also plenty of hearsay about ghosts, murders, and even devil worship at Derceto, so Carnby, fascinated by all of this, takes the case with $150 richer. For Emily Hartwood, all of this is personal, as Jeremy Hartwood was, in fact, her uncle. Upon reading the letter containing the horrible news of her uncle's fate, she knew that Derceto's morbid influence must have something to do with it. Emily's intro holds a surprising amount of hints about Derceto, such as a secret library door and books of occult themes. There's also a nod to take a look at piano's secret drawers, hopefully to find an explanation to all the things that had happened. In addition, a police report regarding Derceto states that Jeremy had blocked the loft window with a wardrobe for some weird reason. Emily sets on a personal journey to uncover the secrets of Derceto. In the end, it doesn't matter which one you choose as your character. The only major difference is the intro text, and the rest of the game is identical. This playthrough will be done as Carnby. Upon reaching the loft, you gain control of your chosen character. The game has no tutorials or any in-game guidelines to learn the game, so everything has to be looked at from the manual. It's arrow keys to move with tank control style, I for inventory, and space alongside arrow keys for multiple different interactions. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of time to get used to things, as we are already under attack within the first minute. A strange monster jumps through the window and commences its attack. In order to defend yourself, you need to hold the spacebar and then hold an arrow key to throw a punch or a kick. Time to channel our inner Chuck Norris. Rest in peace, legend. The animations are really smooth. They look really impressive. Defeating the monster allows no room to breathe, as another one appears from the background trapdoor. Fortunately, it's a slow zombie-like creature, perhaps a ghoul, so we can take a second to get used to controlling Carnby. Overall, it's a rather shocking experience that everything gets very chaotic during the very first minutes of the game. In Derceto, you are a very unwelcome guest. This reminds me of the beginning of Resident Evil 2, where there's no room to take a breather, just do your best to survive in a trial by fire. Okay, so how do you interact with the world? In order to perform different actions, you need to open up the inventory screen and choose the appropriate action. Fight, open, search, close, push, and very late in the game, one extra action, but we'll get to it eventually. There is no quick way to switch between these basic actions, so you need to go through the inventory screen every time, which is tedious. To open a chest, we need to select the action first and then hold the spacebar in front of it. Wow, a rifle already! Looks like a pump-action shotgun to me, but I'm no weapons expert. The weapons melee and ranged work almost as the same as the hand-to-hand combat. Choose the weapon from the inventory, hold space, aim with left and right arrows, and then shoot with up or down arrows. The inventory screen also holds information regarding your health value and the amount of ammunition and resources, such as oil. You'll get very familiar with the inventory quickly, I can guarantee that. The most frustrating feature controlling your character is running. To do this, you need to tap the up arrow key twice. Sounds simple, yeah, however the game is super picky whether it's done correctly. It took me roughly 2 to 3 hours to figure it out, how to get it working most of the time, or at least I thought so, as the inconsistent running mechanics took me to my grave so many times, even after the 3rd hour. To get it working most of the time, make sure your character has stopped moving and then do a very quick double tap to initiate the run. However, do keep in mind that even this doesn't always work, especially when there's a lot happening on the screen and the frame rate takes a dip. It feels like the game sometimes eats another one of those taps due to lower framerate values. Despite the impressive combat animations, the combat itself is not very enjoyable, or to be specific, controlling your character in combat. Depth perception is a very tricky thing, as sometimes it's quite hard to determine the distance between you and a monster, which often leaves you swinging in the air until you yourself take a hit. It's also surprisingly hard to shoot a monster that is far away in the distance. Speaking of monsters, they are absolutely relentless and you're getting no mercy. There are plenty of possible situations where you can get stun-locked into a position where you cannot escape or defend yourself. Here I was just fooling around with a cool saber that broke in half and now I'm getting stun-locked. These situations are a death sentence, which leads to a really cool looking game over sequence. After getting my ass handed to me as Carnby, I took a brief look at Emily's gameplay, and for the first time I saw her introductory sequence with all of its clues regarding Derceto. With these clues in my mind, I realized that you can actually block both of the monsters entering the loft during the first few minutes. The wardrobe can be pushed to block the loft window, as Emily's intro hinted, and you can push the chest containing the rifle to block the trapdoor. Unbelievably impressive, considering that this game was released in 1992. Unfortunately, playing as Carnby, you would have not had any idea about these things for the first time. On the other hand, Now we know that there are multiple ways to deal with the monsters without leaning to conventional combat, and that's what Alone in the Dark is all about. As we return to Derceto, once again as Carnby, we perform all the tricks we learned during our brief time as Emily to earn a breather to take a closer look at the loft. There's plenty of other items to find, such as a very crucial oil lamp and an old Indian blanket. By taking a look at the piano, we indeed find a message left by Jeremy from one of the piano's secret drawers. This message is like a portent of doom, a dark foretelling, setting the mood of the game. Something out of this world has been set free in Derceto, and we are to find out what it is. All of the found documents, whether they are books, letters or parchments, are fully voiced. Some of them, in my opinion, are very fitting to the dark atmosphere of the game, which is the trump card of Alone in the Dark.
I am filled with horror at the thought of my father dying in this place.
There's also a book containing an excerpt of the myth of the Golden Fleece. Upon taking a listen, it's hard to say whether this contains any useful knowledge, but it actually does. The game usually hides puzzle solutions to these kinds of excerpts of myths, stories, and pieces of recent history. Documents consisting of little to none information are in clear minority in the game, so keep on searching the manor for documents. Alone in the Dark is very much a game of meticulous searching. You really need to go through all the bookcases, shelves, drawers and such to find all the possible items, which might be the key to progress in the game. Most of the time, there are no visual indicators of a possible concealed item, so you need to hug and search so many things during the game, even under pressure, and it can be frustrating. This bow on the floor is one of rare exceptions, and you can pick it up just by moving close to it. Speaking of looks, most of the time the game does look pretty good, considering the time it was made. However, sometimes the backgrounds do look a bit outdated. It's like they were made with MS Paint. In my opinion, the model work is absolutely gorgeous, not by today's standards at all, but this does tingle my old school brain in many ways. Although I do think those zombie chickens look a bit too funky. Now that we've touched the topic of aesthetics, the audio side is also working pretty well. Sound effects are mostly very fitting, but melee combat is a weird one. No matter whether you're swinging your fists or a blade, hitting your target always sounds like a slap to the cheeks. The music, with all of its chromatic passages, is just magnificent. Horror, fear, terror, mystery, isolation, anxiety, uncertainty. All the correct themes representing Alone in the Dark are here, and during this video you will hear plenty of music from the game. The compositions themselves are marvelous, but sometimes the game engine plays them in a funny way. The Alone in the Dark team sought a dynamic soundtrack which would live alongside the occurrences in the game world. It's not implemented too well, and sometimes the game takes 360 turns in atmosphere, which is unfortunately a potential mood killer. There's also multiple points where the combat music is playing even though there's no combat involved. This great soundtrack was composed by Philippe Vacher, whose work regarding video games apparently has been mostly done in collaboration with his colleagues from the Alone in the Dark team. Most memorable works alongside Alone in the Dark would be Little Big Adventure Games and Time Commando. Oh no. It's really one-of-a-kind game with impressive animations and CGI, but the gameplay is unfathomably janky. Playing the game is, how should I say this, pure anguish. Let's get back to Alone in the Dark. The myth of the Golden Fleece did in fact contain a solution to unlock the rest of the Derceto manor. In order to remove these two winged guardians blocking the staircase, we need to place two mirrors to the statues in front of them. The guardians are impervious to conventional damage, and they will smack you really hard if you're feeling for closer attention. The two mirrors cause immense pain to the guardians, and very quickly they are gone from this plane of existence. Descending the staircase leads to the second floor of the manor, where we are met with large doors closing in front of us, accompanied by menacing laughter. At this point of the game, there are plenty of points of interest to explore, as most of the manor is unlocked. Naturally, there are closed doors, which need to be unlocked with a specific key, but all the three main floors of the manor are open for exploration. There's even a living piece of medieval armor waiting for you to take a closer inspection. Running past the armor leads to a room with a gramophone on the table and a ghost sitting on an armchair. I'm trying to grab an item on top of the fireplace, but I accidentally disturb the ghost, who transforms into multiple colored spheres. The spheres begin to pursue you, and touching them is an instant death. Speaking of instant deaths, Alone in the Dark has plenty of them, which will become very apparent to you during the first playthrough, as you really would have no idea about most of them. The only visually confirmable instant death would be these cracked blanks in the third level. However, they do hold your character's weight very well during the walk towards the loft. Wouldn't it be fun for your character to fall to their death during the intro walk? No game for you, my friend. The right side of the second floor has the first pitch black room, which requires you to use that oil lamp you found at the loft. To use the lamp, it has to be filled with oil and lighted with matchsticks or a lighter, which are hidden somewhere in the manor. Matchsticks can be found in the gramophone room with the ghost. When all of this is done, you can equip the lamp to see in the dark rooms. A lamp has to be held in hand every time you are in a dark room, and it doesn't allow you to perform any other actions when holding the lamp. If an item is visible, you can run towards it to pick it up, but if you're feeling like searching shelves for hidden items in a dark room, you have to do it without the lamp, and you are forced to do this at some point in the game, and it's ridiculous. Holding the lamp depletes fuel, so take the lamp off your hands when you do not need it, as it only spends fuel when wielded. The amount of fuel is limited during the game, but it's very unlikely that it'll run out. This room has a very heavy statuette lying on top of the table, but we are not able to pick it up as our inventory is full. Alone in the Dark leans heavily into inventory management, and the game forces you to drop items every now and then in order to pick up new ones. The game's inventory management is an odd one to me. At first I thought it was just a limited amount of carried items, but apparently some items take more inventory space. It seems that the weight of the item plays a crucial role in how much space it takes in your inventory. Sometimes it's hard to determine which weighs a lot, for example this shoebox found a bit later in the game. Determining what items can be dropped is difficult, as every single item in your inventory can be dropped, and you really do not know what is needed later. In hindsight, during my playthrough, I could have dropped so many items which I had in my inventory for the whole game. Luckily, the dropped items never disappear, and they can be recovered from where you dropped them. There's also this bathroom nearby with a purple monster in a bathtub. The monster is unfortunately immortal, and it will attack you if you're in the bathroom. There is a first aid case located in a cabinet nearby. These cases contain a special flask which allows you to heal some damage you've received. There's only 2 first aid cases during the whole game, so they are a real luxury, which emphasizes you to evade combat as much as possible. It also emphasizes a strong urge for continuous saving, because you never know what kind of BS you're thrown at. You can save your game whenever you want, and it's very recommendable. Personally, I also recommend having multiple save slots if you manage to screw up by saving your game in a bad time. This applies to many old games. Continuing onwards leads to a long corridor with a lot of Jeremy's paintings. Moving forwards makes one of the paintings throw a homing axe towards you. It cannot be evaded and it deals quite a lot of damage, so most likely it's a death trap for the first time. The axes thrown by the painting will stunlock you, so do not try to outrun them. The solution to this puzzle is to cover the painting with that Indian blanket, allowing you to proceed. Unfortunately, there is another possessed painting waiting for you on the other side, shooting homing arrows at you. One of the second floor's explorable rooms is a bedroom containing Jeremy's diary. Jeremy had begun to dream of morbid, unexplainable visions, which at first he thought was just a coincidence. Eventually the visions began influencing his art, which led him to question his sanity. What is sanity? Where does madness begin? He sought to study the occult literature located in Derceto Library in order to find an explanation to this sudden surge of nightmares. During his study, Jeremy finds a hidden room in the library with a sacrificial dagger and plenty of ritual literature belonging to some sort of cult. Filled with dread, he begins to understand his father's, Howard Hartwood's fate, who, according to the manor butler, died of choking on his own blood due to him biting his own tongue off. Eventually, Jeremy's dreams began to take its toll on his sanity as the visions become increasingly macabre. One day, he was actually approached by a person from his dreams. He called him the Dark Man, the face of death. With his strength waning, Jeremy decides to find a way to send the Dark Man back to wherever he came from. Eventually he finds out a pentacle that has powers to repel the Dark Man, which he draws on the secret room floor. It turns out to be a success, and the Dark Man is gone, leading Jeremy to draw the same symbol on his bedroom floor, allowing him to get some good night's sleep. However, it doesn't take too long for the Dark Man to find a way to his dreams yet again. Utterly exhausted, Jeremy spirals into madness and discovers a cave beneath Derceto, which his father had been looking for all along due to his particular interest in piracy and treasure. It is revealed that Howard was also plagued with the same visions as Jeremy when he was searching for the cave. Jeremy finally realizes that the Dark Man is seeking an alive body for himself, and he deduces that to be the reason behind his father's fate. Shit has hit the fan at Derceto, and this realization leads Jeremy following his father's terrible fate. So the monsters in the manor come from that very cave Jeremy found, and they pursue us to get a body for the Dark Man. Nonetheless, finding that cave is our goal. That previously mentioned library is actually accessible through that corridor with Jeremy's possessed paintings. You just cannot go too deep in the corridor so that the arrow painting doesn't turn you into a moving pincushion. The library is another one of these dark rooms, so the oil lamp is needed. After illuminating the room with the trusty oil lamp, we are greeted by a new kind of monster that is slow but capable of clipping through solid obstacles, so it's a ghost or apparition of some sort. The library is a horrible place due to the darkness and that monster, because in this room you are forced to search many shelves without the oil lamp, while that monster is chasing you. This place is filled with plenty of possible scenarios where you're sandwiched between a bookshelf and the monster that is partially clipping through another bookshelf. The monster is immune to conventional damage, meaning we are stuck, so that's game over, man. The library has an obvious secret room, which is most likely the hidden room Jeremy found, behind a highlighted bookshelf, but it requires something to open it, as there's apparently a mechanism. At the moment we cannot open it, so we need to explore other places. This library contains many crucial books, with one of them explaining that the heavy statuette is the only way to defeat that animated armor. Defeating the armor awards us its sword, which is maybe the most consistent melee weapon in the game. The library also introduces us to harmful books capable of damaging or even killing your chosen character. This is an excerpt from the book of Abdul al-Hazred, which is commonly known as the Necronomicon. Reading the book causes your character to spiral into madness and experience horrible physical twisting and distortion. A fun fact about this specific excerpt is that the CD versions of Alone in the Dark are lacking the intended final verse, which is explained in the book's harmful effects. So in the GOG version, there is no intended final verse. There's also another hidden book which unveils a bit more of Derceto's history. It was built in the year of 1818 by a wealthy yet loathsome man named Elijah Pickford, who was very keen on finishing the building as fast and discreetly as possible. In the manor's opening ceremony, Pickford announced that it would be named Derceto, which reminded him of Astarte, the goddess of fertility. In the Derceto region, Astarte is also known as Shub-Niggurath, which is in fact perhaps the most worshipped outer god in the Cthulhu mythos. Later in 1862, the Derceto manor was burned down by a group of Americans, and Pickford lost his life in the inferno. However, in 1875, the manor was rebuilt by Howard Hartwood, as he discovered that Pickford was a pirate at some point of his life, and Howard knew that Pickford must have had some treasure left somewhere in Derceto, so he had it rebuilt exactly as it had been before. Miraculously enough, the library with all of its contents was completely untouched by the flames in 1862, so all of its books are from Pickford's time. Considering the contents of the library, this Pickford guy was definitely a shady fellow. Speaking of pirates, there's actually one located on the very first floor with a wooden leg and all, swinging his sword furiously. Feels like a random sight for the eyes considering the other creatures we've battled with before. Alone in the Dark is set in the 1920s, so that would mean that this pirate is over 100 years old, even older, so maybe it's a ghost yet again. The pirate actually has a physical form and it can be fought in one-on-one combat with a sword. If you try to blast him with ranged weapons, he will evade them. The pirate drops a key to a nearby dance hall. The dance hall has something to do with that gramophone, which was found previously, as there's multiple recordings to be found in the manor. In order to use the gramophone and the recordings, you need to have them in close proximity to each other. Just use a recording close to a gramophone and enjoy the music. If you're not feeling enjoying the music, that's too bad, because the recording will play through even if you leave the dance hall. Unfortunately, I have no solution to this room, at least yet, so I'm dropping everything to the dance hall for the future. Most likely, there's more recordings somewhere. Also another thing, do not approach the figures in the dance hall. Next to the dance hall lies a small garden of some sort with a statue in the middle. Upon searching the statue, we find 3 arrows, which are most likely usable with the bow we found very early on in the game. However, it's another trap, which spawns multiple purple spiders while tanking the game frame rates. These spiders cannot be fought against, and they send you very quickly to the main menu. There is really no way to avoid dying here unless you know it's coming. The first floor also holds the manor kitchen with plenty of things to search for. There's even a pot of soup that's made of humans. Ugh. The most valuable finding would be the key to the cellar, which door is located close to the garden. There's also a revolver contained in a shoebox, so now we got 2 real pieces of weaponry. That key to the manor cellar is very important, as it means that we are able to get to that cave where all the horrors are coming from. Yep, there's that cave entrance located behind 2 barrels. Just remove the block next to barrels and... well, what did I expect really? There's indeed a cave under Derceto, but it's guarded by a gigantic worm-like creature which is immune to all damage, so we need to find another way in. The cellar also holds a book called The Trial of Captain Prext, transcribed by Howard Hartwood. Ezekiel Prext was the pirate captain of frigate Astarte, and he was trialed by his fellow mates for not sharing the treasure. Before the hanging, he gloated that he cannot be killed, for he cannot die. The remaining pirates took these last words to heart, as it made them remember a fateful night in the Florida swamp where Prext went missing. Prext had heard stories of black magic, human sacrifices, and voodoo rites during their travels in the New England coast, which piqued his interest. After Prext returned to his crew, he shouted, "'Tis the devil that guides us now, me hearties," which was met with suspicion. The crew had no idea what had happened, but after that, the Astarte began taking the juiciest loot ever after another, so their luck had turned good. Later, the crew discovered one of their own with a dagger on his back, and molten lead had been poured down his throat. It seems that Prext had indeed performed a ritual of dark magic requiring a human sacrifice. Even though Prext was hanged, he came back alive, and for some reason, his crew welcomed him back. Very forgiving crew of pirates, I must say. Astarte set sails towards New Orleans, Louisiana, where Prext and few of his trusted companions went deeper to the swamp with 2 large wooden chests with them. 2 days later, the rest of the crew heard screams and shots fired. Prext returned alone and claimed that they were attacked by alligators, and he managed to escape with his life. Yeah, right. This guy is obviously full of it. Suspiciously enough, he brought a new friend dressed in black. He named Keith and called him a hearty mate. This Keith fellow had given Prext a map of his new hideout, none better, which was apparently a cavern which resembled a maze. Soon after, Prext announced his withdrawal from the life of piracy. He gave Astarte to his trusted mates, alongside 3 chests full of gold and gems for the crew. He had found something far better than gold. He left Astarte with Keith, never to be heard from again. I wonder whether that pirate we've met before is connected to all of this. It could possibly be Prext himself, considering him evading the clutches of time and death before. If it was Prext, it would be that he is most likely still alive. Puzzles have mostly been about obtaining a piece of document and then based on it, figuring out a solution to a problem at hand. They have not been too complicated in my opinion, however there are a couple of hard ones to figure out, or at least I had problems with. The arrow painting in the library corridor had me stumped for a good while. At first I was thinking that you could deal with it the same way as the axe painting. The problem is that there is no other way to the end of the corridor, so that means there's another kind of solution. The solution is to shoot the painting from a safe distance with a bow and an arrow. This kind of puzzle solution makes me think of those old point-and-click games where you have to think quite a lot outside of the box. I mean, like, how should I have known this? The painting shoots arrows, so I must do so too? Leave a comment to enlighten me. Another one would be this room close to the pirate. There is an ashtray of some sort which produces highly damaging smoke, making exploring the room very difficult. This one took me a while as well. You're supposed to grab a jug from the bathroom upstairs, where the bathtub monster is located, and then you need to fill it with water from the kitchen pantry. I have to admit, I thought that the jug was just a part of the background when I visited the bathroom for the first time. To get rid of the smoke, you need to pour the contents of the jug on the ashtray. There is a document in a locked room beyond the smoke room explaining the effects of the smoke, but the document never really gives any hints on how to deal with it. It's an otherworldly cigar producing endless smoke, so of course I'm trying to think of a creative solution. Am I just overthinking these puzzles, or do they just feel out of place compared to the other ones? Moving back to the painting corridor. After figuring out the painting problem, there's another bedroom with a fake book on the table. This is the key to open the hidden room in the library. There's also an old grandfather clock which can be pushed to the side, unveiling a hole in the wall with a document and a key. With the document we realize that the monster inhabiting the library is called a vagabond, that is a creature from other spheres of existence. Supposedly the vagabond can be sent back to its original dimension with unspecified steel, which hopefully is explained further soon. That fake book does indeed open the way to a hidden room in the library. This is the room where Jeremy found out about the pentacle, capable of repelling creatures from beyond, and there's the first one drawn to the floor, so that means this room is warded from the vagabond. The shelf nearby has 3 different daggers and 2 parchments and a book on it. One of the documents is a book about special occult literature that has an immediate perilous effect on the reader. One of those books would be the Necronomicon, which we already had read an excerpt from, with not so delightful effects. The second one is Unaussprechlichen Kulten, which is German and roughly translated as the Nameless Cults. And finally, the third one is De Vermis Mysteries, which is apparently the worst of them all. First one of the parchments explains which one of the 3 daggers is the way to send the vagabond back to its own dimension, which is exactly what we're gonna do next. Well, that was weird. Second one of the parchments is the one explaining the power behind the pentacle. This is the document that Jeremy also found. The pentacle is a sign of the most ancient gods, and it has been used many times before in history in order to protect places or individuals from creatures from other dimensions. There's also a talisman on the table with a pentacle on it, so it must be super important. There seems to be another book I've missed, so let's check it out.
Ludwig Prien, De Vermis Mysteriis.
Oh! The key we found behind the grandfather clock unlocks the door in the room with the spectral cigar. This room is Jeremy's personal study, with a bookshelf containing another recording and the tale of Captain J.W. Norton of the Union. This book is basically retelling the story of the burning of Derceto from the perspective of the American Union captain. We've heard this story before, but it's now much more detailed, revealing the true end of Elijah Pickford. Captain Norton's company was on duty to free slaves from the Confederate plantations. After questioning some of the freed slaves, they found the Derceto Manor in Louisiana. While the company decided to spend the night in the area, the owner of Derceto, Pickford, invited the captain and his lieutenant Patterson for a talk and a meal. After the meal, Patterson decided to take a look at how the men were doing, which led Pickford offering a cigar to Norton. This cigar is the very same we've found just before, and its bitterness made Norton feel woozy. However, Patterson suddenly returned and Norton snapped out of it. Something had occurred outside. Most likely the company was under attack by Pickford's slaves, which led to the skirmish outside. Norton quickly shot Pickford 3 times, and then the 2 Union men escaped the burning Derceto along the company, while Pickford's slaves tried to save their master from the flames. There is a shield hanging on the wall with a single saber attached. There's apparently a hidden mechanism, which means that you need to bring over that other saber found in the very early game. This part made my heart skip a beat or 2, because that saber broke in half last time I had it, and therefore I just discarded the 2 pieces in different rooms in the manor. I was almost panicking as I was thinking that the saber had to be intact for this puzzle. Luckily the saber doesn't need to survive intact to solve this puzzle. You can just place the 2 broken pieces here, unlocking a secret staircase leading to the underground caves. Before going underground, we make a quick return to the dance hall with the newfound recording. It is the Dance of Death, Dance Macabre, and it is indeed the solution to the dance hall puzzle, allowing the figures to move. Here you must grab the key located by the fireplace without touching the dancing figures. It feels a bit difficult of a task because of the dropping frame rates, but we managed to grab it without incurring the wrath of the colored spheres. Descending the stairs in the study takes us to the underground caves. It's gonna be a real treat as we are already met with another trap. It's an obvious one, but I had to try it. We meet again with that huge worm creature, and this time the idea is to outrun it. It's an instant death if it catches you. Evading the worm leads to a watery area. It is inhabited by these monsters that are shambling in the water. The catch is to evade the waters as much as possible, because these monsters cannot travel beyond the water. There's plenty of falling platforms to keep you on your toes, and if you fall, do try to get back up ASAP. To climb back, you just need to walk or run towards dry land. This underground area breaks the basic flow of the game by adding a new action to the menu, which is jumping. There is absolutely no indication whatsoever of this appearing on your action list, and it's confusing. Jumping is a mandatory action in order to beat the game, as you need to use it in many platforming sections. Fortunately, jumping is actually working very well. Upon discovering it, I had some presumptions that it would be a rage-inducing experience, but here I stand corrected. Carnby jumps like a real athlete. What do you know? The platforming section leads to a large cavern with narrow breaches of planks that some of are obviously set to fall down upon stepping on. However, the falling pieces of bridge are not the real problem. The camera angles are. You can actually evade the falling platforms by running past them quickly, but the camera angles make it hard. The bridges are so narrow that it's easy to fall off while running, so you kinda do have to take it slow. There are higher and lower platforms that are not clearly indicated in every camera angle, and the triggers where the camera angle changes are dangerously placed, so you can easily run off. To add another insult to the injury, there is a small flying creature trying to knock you off. Fortunately, it can be sent to the afterlife, so it's useful to do so. If you fall to the water, your oil lamp goes off and your ranged weapons are useless. Most likely you'll take so much fall damage that you'll just die before the monsters can get you. And yes, there is indeed fall damage in this game. After reaching the end of the section, there is a lone chest waiting for you. The chest is unlocked with the key from the dance hall, and it contains a book and a gem. This book is actually a message left by Ezekiel Prext himself. The pirate captain reveals himself as Elijah Pickford, for he has lived over 3 centuries thanks to his practice in occultism. He is indeed after a new body, since he lost his own in the burning of Derceto. Then what was that pirate on the first floor if he had no body anymore? Nonetheless, he is frustrated over losing both of the Heartwoods before he could have had their bodies, so therefore he is after ours. Pregs taunts us to meet him in his inner sanctum, so that our body may become his new vessel. A small side note is that the worm in the caves is revealed to be a Chthonian, which is apparently such a powerful creature that it resisted the pirate captain's influence. So it's apparently an independent creature from another dimension doing whatever it wants. In order to reach the inner sanctum, we need to push aside a huge boulder behind the chest, and to be fair, it isn't an obvious thing at all. Personally, it didn't occur to me that it could possibly be pushed because the boulder is way bigger than Carnby. Imagine this skimpy guy pushing a gigantic boulder. In addition, the boulder blends to the background so that it feels like a part of the cavern deco. All this led me backtracking all the way to the Chthonian until I realized that you really need to push the boulder aside. Now I feel like Chris Redfield in Resident Evil 5. Next up is the penultimate part of the game, which is a dark maze that requires you to use the oil lamp once again. Luckily there's no monsters around, so you can take your time to find the way forward. This part has, yet again, filled me with feelings of those old point-and-click games of the 90s. After a while, we reach a door with a slot for the gem that was found in the pirate's chest. This door leads to the final boss, which is Preg's soul imprisoned in a tree of some sort. The tree shoots fireballs, while the water creatures are coming after you. This is actually the very place you are taken to when the game over sequence plays, which is a super cool detail. The key to beating the boss is to pick up a hook from the altar and replace it with the pentacle talisman. This weakens the immortal Pregst, making him vulnerable. To destroy him, we need to throw the oil lamp at him. Torching Pregst triggers the ending sequence, where you're to escape the manor, which means backtracking all the way to the first floor. The hook from the altar unlocks this very familiar door, which is the way back to the manor. There's no more monsters around, so it's a bit of an anticlimactic trip back, especially when the final escape music doesn't loop correctly, diminishing some of the built-up tension. Upon reaching the main entrance, Carnby takes a jump of joy and takes his leave. And what do you know? The driver coincidentally comes back to pick us up. What a nice lad. So how was it? It was definitely an entertaining piece of history. It's very impressive in many ways, although you can feel its age not so positively in many other ways. Most of the character models look nice to me considering their age, and their animations are very smooth, especially when the game's frame rates are stable. However, there are many situations where the frame rates go way down, and that's usually when there are many animated models active at the same time. At those moments, things don't look so impressive. The pre-rendered backgrounds clearly show their age, and understandably so, because they were indeed handmade with a software, the Deluxe Paint version 3 or 4. However, some of the backgrounds, even in this age, do look nice to me, such as the underground platforming stones. The game's strength lies in atmosphere, and it's still quite relevant nowadays. It reminds me of the feelings crawling in the mansion basement in Resident Evil. Not that one. Yeah, that's the one. The game weaves its web of emotions with fear, panic, terror, anxiety, and mystery. You don't really feel like checking out the commotion in the next door, but at the same time, you're curious to see what it really is. It's like having a nightmare as a kid, waking up sweaty and then peeking under your blanket to see whether there is a monster in your room. Unfortunately, the atmosphere does falter when there's a wrong piece of music playing in the background. They didn't quite hit the nail with the dynamic soundtrack. The combat music plays way too often, even though the main idea of the game is to evade combat. I guess they wanted to induce frequent panic to the player. Sometimes the combat music plays even when there's no combat involved, which in my opinion breaks the natural flow of the game. The soundtrack itself is marvelous. As mentioned previously, it represents all the crucial emotions in the game, and Mr. Vache nailed it. I do believe Alone in the Dark is a crucial playthrough for a classic survival horror enthusiast. It's about a 6-hour-long adventure for the first time, and subsequent playthroughs can be done really fast, in an hour or even under. It reminds me, yet again, one of those classic point-and-click games in that sense. I'm probably already sounding like a broken record with these comparisons, so sorry about that. It's rather a shame that the two playable characters have little to no differences. There's not much point in playing the game twice. The only differences would be the story intro and some animations. Just look at Emily having a real nutbuster kick. That'll deny the next monster generations for sure. Speaking of kicking, the overall gameplay is hard to describe, and I do believe it's the very major weakness of the game. It's not unbearable at all, the gameplay does work okay, but there are flaws which are annoying. The dark rooms are problematic because you need your both hands free to search the shelves and compartments alike. It's a real hassle to go back and forth with the oil lamp and searching, especially in the library. The pre-rendered backgrounds distort the depth perception, causing problems in figuring out where you actually are. This causes problems in large areas, especially in combat, when it's hard to determine where the enemy actually is. However, my personal demon with the game wasn't combat, it was running. As I previously described, it was ridiculously hard to figure out how it works most consistently, and after that, it still didn't always work. My playthrough had so many unnecessary deaths thanks to me f***ing up the running mechanics. Puzzles were mostly very understandable, and the solutions are usually in the documents found during the game. Very often you do need to figure them out from excerpts of myths, stories, and diaries alike, and there's really a few ones telling you the solution head-on, like, do this and that to be a winner. Only with 2 puzzles, as described previously, I had problems. Maybe I was overthinking, but they did differ a lot from the rest of the puzzles in the game. Alone in the Dark is paced very well. The story flows nicely, and it gets really interesting if you're into checking out all the documents found in the game. I would also imagine Lovecraft and Chaosium enthusiasts to get a bit more out of the game due to their previous knowledge on concepts like Cthulhu, Dagon, Shub-Niggurath, Necronomicon, and the Old Ones. First and foremost, the game is for patient explorers, and there's really no feeling of being overwhelmed by the game mechanics. I also think it's an enjoyable addition that they weaved in some real-world occurrences, in particular the American Civil War, to the game's story, blending facts with works of fiction. There's only one thing about the story that I did not understand, and that was the pirate located on the first floor of the manor. If that was Pregged, whose body was it if he lost his own during the burning of Derceto? Please do share your knowledge in the comment section once again. Speaking of Pregged, the concept of a pirate achieving immortality reminds me a lot of Cervantes de Leon from Soul Calibur series. Both of the evil pirates were able to become immortal with the help of some sort of dark magic. Pregged with occultism and Cervantes with the soul edge. Another similar character would be LeChuck from Monkey Island games. He also dabbled with voodoo and the occult, although he became an undead abomination as a result. Alone in the Dark was a success critically and financially. It was considered a revolutionary game and it launched Infogrames to world renown. It was an obvious thing that there had to be more Alone in the Dark games. Unfortunately, there was a great disagreement with the direction of the sequels, where the original team wanted to continue in the spirit of the original, but the management wanted to lean more into action. The end result is that the key members of the original team left Infogrames and they formed a new company, Adeline Software International, which were mostly known for Little Big Adventure games. So the Alone in the Dark series continued on with a new team. The classic sequels Alone in the Dark 2 and 3 did very well lean into the action-oriented gameplay, disregarding what made the OG special. From the financial perspective, they were a big success, rocketing Infogrames, especially the founder Bruno Bonnell, in the business deals of many acquisitions, which eventually led Infogrames purchasing Atari from Hasbro. In 2004, Infogrames reorganized every asset into one and rebranded themselves under the Atari banner, a name everyone knew and still knows. There was no turning back for the series, as action was the real hot stuff. Fans of the original were lamenting upon the new direction, and that hasn't changed during all the years. After the 3 classic games, all the new ones tried something new. In 2001, the new Nightmare tried to be a real Resident Evil clone. It's funny that during the development of the original Resident Evil, Shinji Mikami took inspiration from Alone in the Dark to solve his problem with the backgrounds, and now Alone in the Dark, the new Nightmare, takes a ton of inspiration from Resident Evil. I've heard it's a good game, but I've no personal experiences with it. The next in line, 2008 reboot, just named Alone in the Dark, is a modern action game blending first and third person gameplay. It was not received too well, and it's an amusing game in a couple of ways. First of all, the dialogue is really something.
I'm the light bringer! I'm the fucking universe! Now give me my stone!
I don't have your stone, and fuck you anyway!
And secondly, Atari took it very personally when websites gave the game poor reviews, threatening them with lawsuits. In short, Atari claimed that the reviewers had wrong versions of the game, even alleging that some of them played illegal copies of the game. It's another whole can of worms, but in the end, the game still remains mixed in reception. The 2 most recent entries to the series, Illumination and the 2024 reimagining of the original, have unfortunately continued the long road of disappointment. Illumination, a third-person shooter, was met with overwhelmingly negative reception, and understandably so.
It's raw!
The 2024 reimagining, also named Alone in the Dark, a third one with the same name, did not live up to the expectations of the fans or shareholders. The failure unfortunately led Embracer to shut down the developer studio, Pieces Interactive, and it's always painful to see a small studio shut down by the big boys. I've no personal experience of the game, but as far as I know, it had plenty of similarities to a modern Resident Evil game. It tried to revitalize the Alone in the Dark series with modern audiences, but didn't succeed in doing so. The original game is a very unique, unanimously liked experience. It's the true grandfather of the survival horror genre, even though it was made as an adventure game first and foremost. The notion of survival horror as a genre was not a thing yet, even though there had been elements of it way before Alone in the Dark. It does unquestionably show its age, but it's still an entertaining piece of history, worthy of a playthrough, and it's a classic for a reason. Cheers and thank you so much for watching.